Now we're going to go into the actual online analytics tools and reporting tools that you should be using. And we're going to start with Google and spend most of the time on Google because, of course, it's free. I mean, everyone's using Google. It's kind of the standard, right? So I'm going to launch a poll here too about Google Analytics version 4. So you should definitely, the first major tool you should be using is Google Analytics. And I'm sure that most of you are on Google Analytics, right? I'm sure you all have that. Now, we're going to get to something that's really, really important, though, which I'm not sure is really mainstream news yet, which is that there's a new version. Well, it's actually not even new. It's 2 years old. So the version of and I'm looking at the poll here, it says 83% of you said you've not switched or don't have a plan. 17% you didn't know it was out. So yeah, this is not common news maybe yet. So anyways, okay, someone says you're not sure what you're using. And that's another thing. Like if you're not really familiar with it, you don't check it a lot, you're probably not sure what you're using. Now this picture here, I put this picture here. That is what Google Analytics version 4 looks like. That is the user acquisition channel. So if you go to your Google Analytics and click acquisition and you see a pie chart, you're not on version 4. So that's one way maybe you can tell. So what Google Analytics does is that is collecting metrics just on your website. Okay, now I'm going to change. There's an asterisk by that, right? Traditionally, if you're talking about universal with the old version, they call universal analytics, that is really focused on just your website. Now, the new version does more than that. So typically, though, Google Analytics, we're talking about what is happening on your website, those metrics. Both versions have real-time and static reporting. So there's a real-time panel. You can see real-time traffic. There is some search engine result page visibility, some paid visibility, and some option for customizing some of the reports. Those are kind of common features across both. So let me talk a little bit about the switch to version 4, because this will impact you. You need to know about this. And I think we have a few blog posts. Check our blog. There's a few posts on it. So the old version of analytics is called Universal Analytics, and that will stop collecting data in, I think it's June 2023. So about a year from now, that's not that far out, really. So you need to be on the new version before then, otherwise you will lose your data collection. Your data collection on your website will stop. So you do have to upgrade. And you don't really upgrade. What you do is you install the new version. They are completely different versions, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about why 4 is so different and why you should care. But they are completely separate versions. They do not share data. So what Google recommends you do is, as soon as possible, install version 4, and don't remove the old version. Run both at the same time until the old one stops collecting data. So you'll have a little bit of an overlap there, but you need to get version 4 set up as soon as possible. And they have a completely different models for how it tracks audiences, how it tracks your goals, right? They call them conversions now. All of that stuff is different, and it has to be set up again. So if you have a really simple Google Analytics install now, if your Universal Analytics has no customization, you just collect the normal stuff. It's like an hour to set up the new version, not a big deal. But if you have all these goals defined, if you have e-commerce, if you're tracking site search, if you have those audience segments I was talking about defined in there, yeah, that's all going to be reset up. So you definitely need to get on this ASAP. So the big things with 4, Google really had to, they really were kind of forced in many ways to make a new version. The old version of Google Analytics is not nearly as secure. Some of that data is not as secure. Also, it collects potentially maybe too much data. You're going to see there was a big push, and this kind of happened with the European Union and GDPR laws. There's a big push to not have personally identifiable data in online analytics programs. So Google actually collects less about the individual user. It's much, much more secure. It does not rely on cookies to do tracking. I'm sure you've heard of the death of the third-party cookie and how cookies are going away, again, because of privacy. So it doesn't rely on that technology. So basically, version 4 can bring all of your online analytics together. It can be installed on your website, your donation app, your event app, actual phone apps if you have any, and other data streams. and they all come together. So your data collection now in version 4 is called a data stream. And the main data stream is your website, your main website, but you may have a store, online store, other platforms. So the version 4 does a much better job of tracking a user's journey through those different platforms, how they all relate, collecting data from them all. It also has what's called enhanced measurement. So in the old version of analytics, if you wanted to track how far people scroll on a page, if you wanted to track a link that left your site, say your donation link goes to a donation platform, that was not recorded by default in analytics. Say you have a file download our annual report, this, that, those were not tracked in universal analytics. You had to do extra work to set that up. Those were custom events you had to put in. Now, the enhanced measurement in version 4, all of that is automatic. It tracks everything automatic. So you don't have to put code in to track scroll depth or file downloads. It just happens automatically. Also, the version 4 is basically an event-based reporting system. Everything, even just a simple page load, is an event, okay? Everything in Google Analytics now is called an event, and you can actually pick events very easily. Say you want to track a conversion, you can pick a whole bunch of events, click them on, bundle them together in something and call it a conversion, which is really cool. It's a lot easier to do certain things. So it's event-based reporting system. Also, it does a really good job of telling stories with that data as a much better view of seeing sort of a funnel and the pathways, right? Someone hit your landing page from an email campaign and they went over here and they did this and they filled out that form. And it does a great job of really visualizing all of that stuff. Okay, so you can get a better idea of the real sort of user journey, not just on your website, but across all these platforms, right? So definitely think about Analytics version 4. Of course, you'll have to switch in 2023. We've got some blog articles on it, and usually for us to switch a nonprofit client, it's pretty quick. It's not that big of a deal, but do it sooner than later, because like I said, the data doesn't move from version 3 to 4. So you want 4 set up ASAP. Next tool we're going to talk about is Tag Manager. This is a tool that people are a lot less familiar with. I'm going to switch this poll quick. So Tag Manager, you can think of Tag Manager as your analytics hub. So actually Google Analytics hopefully is installed through Tag Manager. It's not installed directly on your website. It's analytics installed through Tag Manager. If you have Crazy Egg, or if you have a HubSpot, or if you have a CRM, or if you have other kinds of tracking code, all that code's installed through Tag Manager. Tag Manager also allows you to create custom interactions. Now, like I said, you don't need to do a custom event for file downloads anymore. If you're on version 4 of Analytics, you don't need to do that. But there's likely going to be a lot of other things. Like, let's say you have a podcast, you've got a podcast page with all these different things that people can press play and listen to one. You want to track the play button clicks. That won't be tracked automatically, but you can use Tag Manager, and usually no programming in order to do that. Or let's say you have a form that submits and it doesn't leave the page. Submit says, thank you, blah, blah, blah. You actually need to put in Tag Manager a custom event for that form submission to track that in analytics. So basically, Tag Manager not only is your analytics hub, but it can feed data to Google Analytics on custom interactions you can define. Basically, every nonprofit website I've ever looked at had an opportunity to track some type of custom interaction. So think about that. Also, usually there's no programming needed. I have almost there in parentheses, because depending upon how your website is built, it could take some custom programming to track certain events. And it's not thousands of lines of code and really complicated, but it's definitely not like a layman's kind of thing. It requires some extra effort in programming. So, but most of the time there's no programming needed. So I asked, do you leverage Tag Manager custom events? About 80% said no, and that's actually common. Most of my nonprofit clients who come to me and I get access to their Tag Manager, there's almost nothing in there. So now keep in mind, when you're on version 4, you don't need those like external link tracking, download tracking, YouTube video play tracking, scroll track. I mean, that's all automatic, but there's a lot of opportunity to do some custom things in there for sure. Next thing is Search Console. This is actually another one a lot of nonprofits are either not aware of or they're not sure if they're checking it. They don't really know. I'll launch a poll about this one too. So Search Console, you don't install this. This is not installed on your site like analytics. It's not installed like Tag Manager or anything else. Basically, you just need to verify that you own your website with Google, and there's multiple methods to do that. And then Google lets you log in to Search Console and see the data on your website. And this is a major part that I was talking about, your website performance and your website visibility, that I don't see a lot of people tracking as a metric, but these are incredibly important. Which keywords you show up for. And if you show up first versus 50th in Google, I mean, that's a huge difference. So these are important metrics. So what Search Console does is it gives you a peek inside of the Google search engine and how it sees your website and what is happening. So the crawl metrics, is Google hitting crawl errors? Is it what percentage of your site is in there? What keywords does your site show up for? What are all the keywords it shows up for? What are your rankings? A really cool one is how you can look at a month's worth of data and see how often this month did I show up in Google and what was the click-through rate? So if the click-through rate's 10%, that means for every 10 times I showed up in Google, one person clicked. So all of this helps you with your site visibility. And it has some technical stuff too. It will show you the speed of your site. If you have a Core Web Vital issue, if you have any errors on your site, those will show up. And I'm going to talk later, show another tool. This tool, Search Console, the data's in there. It's kind of terrible to use. This is much more useful with a paid tool, and I'll show you one that you can use. Also, Search Console keeps 18 months of data. That's it. So if you want more than 18 months, which is right, you'd want to see how your keyword is trended over 3 years. You're going to need more than Search Console. So the next one, so it looks like 80% of you have said no, you've never looked at your crawl report for errors. So again, this is not a super common tool. That's why I wanted to do this webinar, to make everyone aware of all these additional free Google tools that not a lot of people are using. The next tool, and this gets into reporting, and this will be our segue into the discussion on reporting. Data Studio is Google's free reporting tool. It is incredibly powerful. You're looking at some custom reports here that we designed for health partners in another company. So you can make custom reports and also dashboards, kind of different dashboards of data. It can bring all of your reporting into one place. So you can look at your social media, email campaign, donor system, event website, like your CRM, your website data. Everything can be brought into one place with what they call connectors. So it's super cool. And this is a hugely valuable reporting tool for creating those user stories around all of your platforms and how are people interacting. People who come from social to our website, what do they most commonly do? How long do they stay on the site? Do they donate? Those kinds of things. So it's highly customizable. You can literally make this look like whatever you want. There is a learning curve to it. It's a bit of a learning curve if you want to do really fancy things. However, they have like a template library. They have a connector library. There's a really good community. You can Google things, find help, find connectors. Most of the connectors are free. There's some paid ones, I think. And if you're really, really ambitious, you can have programmers make your own connectors. Say you have your own donation system for forever ago that's not supported by anything. You could technically write your own connector. It also just connects with Google Sheets. So let's say if you have data you just can't track, you have to manually put it in. Say you're collecting something like physically in person, collecting something, you want to track it, you can put it in a Google Sheet and connect that to Data Studio.